start Bikkhurim Perek Aleph Mishnah Beis. We've explained in the first Mishnah that you cannot bring Bikkhurim if you are not dealing with property which is your own. This Mishnah Beis now goes to explain that in further detail. It says, Me'ezeh tam eino mevi. What is the reason we've just said that you cannot even bring the Bikkhurim when the land is not entirely yours? Mishum shenemar, because the Pasuk says, Reishis Bikkurei ad mosecho. It's got to become yours, it's got to come from the first fruit of your land. It has to be yours. Ad sheyu kol hagidulim me'ad mosecho. This means that all the produce must come from your own land. In the previous Mishnah we saw it was coming partly from land which was not yours, and therefore there was no din of Bikkhurim. Now the Mishnah goes and gives some more examples of land which cannot be considered as your own. And it starts off with ha'arisin v'ha'chochayros. Those are both forms of leasehold, forms of tenancies. In the case of the oris, an oris is a person who takes possession of the land of the owner for a percentage of the produce. So he'll say, I'll work your land for the whole of this year, or for however many years it's leased to him, and the owner gets a percentage of turnover or percentage of the produce of the land. That cannot be considered as belonging to the oris because it is there's a freeholder who owns it, and therefore the oris is potter from Bikkhurim. V'chachayros, that's also a form of leasehold, but this time it's not, the rent is not paid by percentage of the turnover. This is paid by a specific sum. It could be a certain amount of produce which is given to the owner. The difference between the two, the essential difference between the two, is in the case of an oris, the owner only gets a percentage of the actual produce, whereas in the case of a choicher, he has to pay a fixed rental, a fixed sum. Whether or not the land produces anything is irrelevant. He just has to pay that fixed sum, like a form of fixed rent. In either of those cases, there are no Bikkhurim because it's not in the ownership of the oris or of the chocher. Similarly, hasikrikon v'hagazlan. The sikrikon is the famous type of bandit who was mentioned in the in Hanizokid in Gittin. It means somebody who takes your land by force. Now, you might say, well, is that not the same as a gazlan? Well, it's not entirely the same. A gazlan is a robber who robs your land, but the sikrikon is somebody who actually will threaten you with murder, even to the extent that it frightens you out of your life, and you might therefore think, well, there's been complete yush. Whereas the gazlan has just robbed the land. He may not necessarily have threatened you personally. And more than that, the sikarikon might well have given you some money, a very, very maybe a pittance or maybe more money, to be able to purchase this land. And therefore, for those reasons, he might think, well, I've now acquired it. Nonetheless, in either of those cases, even though they have taken full possession, and even though the owner is probably more or less miyash, that means he's given up hope of getting it back, nonetheless, these are not chayiv in Bikkhurim, mishum shenema reishis Bikkurei ad mosecho. Again, it's got to be your land entirely. Now this raises an interesting question, which is quoted in the name of the Chazon Ish, that why is this different in this particular mitzvah from other cases where we know that once the property is left, even if it's left illegitimately, but the owner has lost it and it's been taken away from him, then the new people become the owners, and the old person is considered to be out of the picture. And the answer given is Biכורים is different from other cases, because the whole concept of Biכורים is going right back to the beginning of history to show the history of what took place. And because of that, therefore, even a Gazlan or a Sikarikon, even these people who may well have technical ownership, are not considered to be the owners of the land for this purpose. It would be inappropriate, and the Mishnah tells us that they cannot bring Biכורים.